Call this meeting of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee to order. This is Tuesday, May 17th, and we are in council chambers of City Hall. First order of business is to identify any potential conflicts of interest. You have the agenda in front of you. Does anybody wish to make any declaration? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 3, citizens' comments. Any citizens wish to comment for the body tonight? Any citizen comments? Third time, any citizen comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 4, the consent agenda. We're looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the May 3rd, 2022 meeting, bills and payroll, and the report of personnel actions. Mr. Hendler, motion to move, or motion to approve, I should say. Second by Mr. Wagner. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
That was an aye for approved, Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
I'll try to give a little longer pause so you can respond. Thank you. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Nothing was removed, so we'll move on to the next item. Request to recommend council approval of budget resolution number 08-2022, increasing the 2022 adopted budget for transferring expense to the capital project fund by $15,000, increasing the 2022 adopted budget for transferring revenue to the general fund by $15,000, and increasing the 2022 adopted budget for public facilities capital outlay by $15,000 for purposes of providing additional funding to replace a chiller at the UWSP Marshfield campus, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
That was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Well, you may recall, those of you who've been around to the last capital improvement plan, that we did approve for the 2022 to 2026 CIP, $90,000 in 2022 as part of replacing the 200-ton chiller at the campus, UWSP Marshfield campus. Again, we are co-owners of the buildings and grounds of that facility. So Wood County paid the other $90,000. The total amount of the chiller cost was expected to be $180,000. Well, as has happened quite often, I think we've heard from Dan Kinect on streets and other people on other purchases and equipment items. The cost has been going up, inflation has been ramping up. And we had a meeting last week. Jennifer and I were with Brian Panzer and Michelle Bornke from the college and Donna Rosar from Wood County. And we were talking about the fact that they had gotten 2 quotes now to begin the project, one at $280 and one at $315. So nowhere near the $180 that had been estimated at the time that they had brought the issue forward last year. So then the question became what to do, and they talked about maybe doing some repairs to try and limp the old one along, but then they look at another option, which is going to a more efficient 150-ton chiller. And my first question was, well, that's a smaller size, but it runs on 6 circuits instead of 2, and therefore if one circuit goes down, it's far less problematic than when one circuit's gone down on the 200-ton chiller that, you know, is involved heavily in cooling the buildings on the campus. So anyway, they felt comfortable with that, and they have a quote for $210,000 if they can get that chiller purchased and installed here soon. So they came to us looking to see if we wouldn't be willing to increase our contribution to this program from $90,000 to $105,000. And if the county would do the same, that extra money would cover the $210,000 purchase and installation of the new chiller. They did indicate it to us at that point, and you'll see it in a note, I think, that I included in the packet from Brian Panzer. They do expect to get $5,000 in salvage value for the old chiller, basically parting it out, for lack of a better term. And Brian had suggested to us maybe we looked at only adding an extra $12,500, both the city and the county, for this project. But in talking about it internally, we kind of felt that maybe it'd be nice just to ignore that salvage value, have the buffer, look at contributing another $15,000 to the project, and give a little fudge room in case the final cost was closer to $210 anyway, even with the salvage value. So with that in mind, what they're asking for is to have the county and the city go together to fund this purchase here in 2022 at the higher cost. And staff's recommendation would be the budget resolution approval, 08-2022, adding effectively another $15,000 to the budget for the replacement of the chiller.
Mr. Hendler.
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Second by Mrs. Tompkins. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously. Number 7, request to recommend council approval of a tourism entity agreement with Visit Marshfield, presented by Steve Barr, City Administrator.
Thank you. In June of 2016, we executed our first agreement, a tourism entity agreement with Visit Marshfield. Actually, at that time, they were called the Marshfield Convention and Visitors Bureau. That agreement ran out in 2020, at which time we entered into another agreement to run through June 30th of 2022. During that time, if you recall, the council was also discussing the possibility of taking it out of the council's direct oversight and creating a tourism commission, as I believe they have in a number of cities across Wisconsin, cities and villages. Council looked at that and decided they didn't feel that they needed to or wanted to add another layer of government in oversight over the allocation of room tax revenues, and that it would be best to have the council continue to keep that role, but that the idea would be to look to sign another contract with the Marshfield, or Visit Marshfield entity. The concern that was raised at that time, at least one concern that was raised, was whether or not Visit Marshfield was tied in a meaningful way to city projects and activities. Now, their mission, of course, is to promote activities, events, and things that create more room stays. It's a lodging tax, 8% that's charged on people who stay at our hotels and other lodging facilities. But within that, they've certainly helped other community projects along the way that bring people to this community, that get people involved in some of our festivals, activities, and concerts, whatnot. And they have contributed to a number of such projects over time. So we started down that road. Al Cheney and Matt McLean, who are here tonight, met with, at the time, Josh Miller and me, talked about some ideas. We looked at the Economic Development Board's action plan for the next few years, and what areas, if any, might Visit Marshfield be willing to or be well suited to participate in. And we identified a few that are marked in your agenda tonight on that EDB action plan. So with that in mind, we looked at some other changes that were made, and you've probably seen them in the memo, minor changes in some respects, but looking at a 4-year agreement with 3-year extensions happening after that time, always subject to the fact that if either side is unhappy, can certainly have that looked at again when the time comes. But I believe firmly that Visit Marshfield does a really great job of promoting this community. They do some outstanding things for the city and the surrounding area to get interest in people coming here. They promote tourism and those kind of things very effectively. I think the agreement is good. I think they've shown a good faith effort to partner with us on the objectives that literally do fit into their mission. So with that in mind, I would recommend that the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee recommend council approval of the proposed agreement. And Al and Matt are here to answer any questions you might have about the agreement from their point of view.
What's your pleasure?
I make a motion to approve the agreement.
Motion by Tompkins to approve. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mr. Hendler. Any discussion? Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, when this thing came up for renewal, there was a lot of question as to whether or not we should form a tourism commission, which we would still have the right to do under the statute. And I looked at that and looked at what the duties and the powers of the commission would be. And they would be essentially doing the same thing that Visit Marshfield, and it's going to take me a while to get used to saying Visit Marshfield. I've got to say it 3 times, right? That's the deal. Okay, Visit Marshfield, got it. All right, and my only concern was whether or not they were accomplishing anything that was in the economic development work program or in the comprehensive plan of the city. And we found independently, I think a friend of the council's, Mr. Pinker, went through and found that there were like 9 things that they do that relate directly to our goals and objectives of those plans. So I'll be supporting this, keeping in mind that, if someday this does not serve our purposes well, we could still look at a tourism commission.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mrs. Tompkins.
Am I allowed to ask a question to people in the audience?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I was just wondering, our hotel stays in the city pre-COVID, have we come up to pre-COVID stays?
Yeah.
Right now, they're not quite. Oh, can we hear me now?
Much better.
As I was saying, they are not currently back to pre-COVID levels. We're doing better than was forecasted a year or two ago. I think the rebound originally for the tourism economy was projected more to be 23, 24, but they're starting to say that this summer is going to be pretty solid, and for the state, and later this year we might see some normalcy. The numbers I'm seeing are 2018-19 were record years for us. 2018 was the record year, Farm Tech Days and a bunch of major events. We had 3 national events that happened that year. So that was the record set, and 19 was very close. I think we're about 10%, 15% behind those, but it's much rosier forecast than a year or two ago was looking. So, yeah.
Also, do we get the tax from Airbnbs in the city of Marshfield?
Yes, I worked with Josh Miller, and there's, I think, typically anywhere from about a dozen to 20 Airbnbs. Some are licensed, some are not. The city, and I think Emmett with that team polices that and is trying to get them to do that. It's kind of a hard thing where some people will do it for a weekend. You know, they'll say, hey, we're Airbnb this weekend, and then they're supposed to have a health code by Wood County. They're supposed to have a license through the city, and it's, I think, going to be kind of a game of cat and mouse. There really aren't. We're not Minocqua or Door County right now, where there's a bunch of them that is a bigger problem, but it could become a problem. And if their room tax isn't collected for the Airbnbs, it's not fair to the hotels. It should be an even playing field.
Any other questions? Mr. Barg.
Thank you. Just one more thing I didn't add that's in my memo that you probably already read. One of the features of this agreement that I really like is the willingness of Matt and Al to meet regularly with us and to give periodic updates to the council at meetings. We want the communication, and I think they want the communication to be, to be greater and to be vibrant and alive. So as some of these different work ideas and projects come on the list and fall off the list, we're talking about what comes next to make sure that we're partnering. I just wanted to add that point.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, we have a motion to recommend for council approval with a second, and we'll take a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Number 8, request to recommend council approval to refill vacant firefighter position presented by Pete Fletty, Fire Chief. Microphone? Thank
How
you.
about now?
Perfect.
Can you hear me now? Good. All right, with the resignation of a firefighter paramedic effective May 6th of 2022, this creates an opening for a full-time firefighter paramedic position within the fire department. The position is currently budgeted for in 2022. Approval to bring this request before this body was approved at the Police and Fire Commission on May 11th of 2022. With that, I'm recommending this body authorize the Marshfield Fire and Rescue Department to allow to fill this vacant position.
It's your pleasure. Mr. Wagner? Second by Hendler. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Number 9, request to recommend council approval of pay grades for 2 street division positions, Public Works Lead Worker grade and Public Works Lead Worker concrete, and authorize staff to fill these positions presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you. In early April, we came to the committee asking you to consider looking at 2 job descriptions for positions at that time referred to by other names. They were lead grade person and lead concrete specialist. And the idea was that these would be working supervisor type positions. They would not be new positions. These are not new employees. It would be elevating current employees so that each one of 2 groups had roughly 10 people that they were overseeing as part of the work crew. And the committee gave their blessing, and so did the council. We sent it to McGrath, After review, McGrath came back, you have a memo in your packet, recommending that the pay grade be set at 127, which would be one grade higher than currently for what those individuals would be at. And again, that's based on the working supervisor nature of the position, the fact that they would have some limited supervisory duties with those other employees. In the discussion, it was also brought up, I think, by Milena from McGrath that perhaps we ought to have different titles. And her preference was Public Works Lead Worker Grade and Public Works Lead Worker Concrete. She thought that that was more appropriately descriptive of the positions in question. Talking with Chris and Dan, we felt that that was good as well. So this was right before we went to print, so to speak, on the agenda. So what you have in your packet, the job descriptions still say lead grade person and lead concrete specialist, but with your blessing as we move forward, we would change that to the two that were read on the agenda cover sheet: Public Works Lead Worker for grade and Public Works Lead Worker for concrete. So staff recommends that the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee recommend council approval to set the pay grade for both of these positions at 127 and authorize staff to fill the positions.
Pleasure.
I make a motion to approve the pay grade levels and the new titles.
Okay.
And to refill.
And a refill.
And to fill the positions.
Or fill.
And to fill the positions.
Okay. I have a motion to approve everything that was presented, including the filling of those positions. Second by Hendler. Questions, discussion? Mrs. Spiros.
Yes, I do want to, originally I had no issues with this whatsoever, and I'm not sure I have an issue with it now, but I will say that I did receive an email, and I also heard from one other street department worker, and they're both alluding to the fact that this isn't a good idea, and it's causing some hard feelings and contentions and things like that in the department. Is there anybody from the department there that can speak on that?
Yes.
And did anyone else receive an email or anything from street workers?
Oh.
Yeah, we're kind of hearing the same thing with a few of our employees, but the way we're looking at it is we're looking at getting these future leaders, kind of doing a stepping stone for future leaders. Of course, not everybody's in favor of somebody else getting a promotion. But with that, we'd start them on the Public Works Supervisory Academy certificate, and we're kind of looking at a stepping stone to start training our future leaders.
Chris, if I may.
Yeah.
Yes.
Follow up. So, I couldn't quite put together the entire email, but from what I understood, they were kind of basically saying this has been being done all along. It's just more on a rotational basis. And sometimes people were getting higher pay for doing, I guess a supervisor type of role. I really didn't understand it. And then sometimes people weren't. So I'm trying to piece together what exactly they're talking about.
Sure. In the past, before the McGrath study, I think it was the Carlson Detman, we used to have summer wages for the guys, and they all kind of stepped up into these summer wages. And that might be alluding to that. With the McGrath study, we took their combined summer wages with their regular wages, and that's how we came up with the pay plan that they have now. And so I'm guessing that's what they're alluding to.
If I can continue just for a minute,
Yes.
please. Sure. Okay, so I'm just kind of scamming. I'm just kind of looking through this email really quick. And I'm trying to get this right because I appreciate somebody, contacting me and with their concerns. This person just says, I do not believe the position is needed in the form it is coming to the council. In the past, there was a need for a fill-in replacement and assistant street superintendent. The management would present to you and ask for permission to fill and compensate for the increase. Okay, yes, we know that. This I believe has worked well in the department. You would find that the majority don't believe this is necessary. There is becoming more resentment in the in the, boy, it gets a little confusing. Some of it's not quite worded right. There's becoming more resentment in the personnel because of this. Again, in the past, the fill-in for the management position has been paid at a higher rate, but when the personnel are asked to fill in at a higher position in the crew, they are not compensated for the extra responsibility at a higher position. This has been told to us that it is considered training. I can understand this program if it is just a day here or there, but this particular summer, the street department has gone back in to doing mainline sewering, which has caused the need for 2 extra people as specialized equipment operators, and in turn, a few more people are doing higher paying positions. These personnel are not being compensated for their time with the extra responsibility that they are going to have the majority of the summer construction season. Yet the lead person, foreman positions are possibly going to receive more compensation while they are being sculpted into management positions. So that was confusing to me, a lot of that email.
Yeah.
And I'm asking you to try to explain what his point is.
Okay, it might be I'm guessing, I haven't seen the email, but the misunderstanding is we do have 2 specialized equipment operators now. And the idea here would be to have our specialized equipment operators are the lead out on their job site, basically not on the job site, but on their work zone. A specialized equipment operator is operating large pieces of equipment, and he's in charge of everything that's surrounding his work zone. Our lead person would be in charge of the job site itself. That person would be responsible for any citizen concerns. If the supervisor's not there, of course, he'd be in charge of the whole job site, much like they are now. What this will also do is help free up the assistants to do more things, such as responding more promptly to citizen concerns and doing their locates and doing a lot more planning. Right now, it's pretty busy out on the job site, and we leave those guys to do those types of duties, as I stated in my memo back in April.
My only caution, I guess, on this would be that I don't want to see the street department get into a place that they were in, say 1.5 years, 2 years ago, where we had a ridiculous amount of turnover because people just in general, it appeared, were not happy.
Right. I understand.
So how will you mitigate that if we go ahead and approve these positions? How will you mitigate that among your employees?
Well, communication is the biggest thing, presenting to the guys exactly what I'm here doing tonight. I was plan on having a staff meeting to hopefully say this was approved and this is what we plan on doing, holding interviews for the positions. And this is the whole, the grander scheme of restructuring a little bit of the department.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Tompkins?
So in this email, one of the things that sounded like was a contentious thing was that sometimes people are put into supervisory roles, but they're not paid more because they're in training. So my question would be, how many hours of training do people have before that training would be done and they would be paid more?
What I think he's talking about is when we had vacant positions, the last 2 assistant positions, we promoted within for somebody to fill in for that position for up to 3 to 4 months or whatever. We come back to the finance budget personnel, to you guys, and say, hey, we're looking at promoting this position to be acting street superintendent, and at that time they get a pay raise for doing that. So that's what I'm guessing that they're talking about.
Mr. Hendler?
Thank you. Dissension in the rank and file is about as common as a cold is. But as long as you feel that you have done the ultimate in justifying these positions, and you feel comfortable in that.
I do, yes.
That's what I feel should happen.
I think change is difficult anywhere that you do something like this, but I think the ultimate goal of where we want to kind of help promote within and offer up these additional steps, I think in the long run, it's gonna work out.
Thank you. Mr. Barg?
Yeah, just to let you know, at our staff meetings with staff leaders, department and division heads, I've challenged Chris and others on the idea of doing more active succession planning. And in streets, there are only so many avenues for people to advance and get that experience to move up to the next step. And I really support that for this reason, to give them an avenue to move up the ladder and be able to aspire to positions greater over time.
Mr. Wagner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I get the feeling that the underlying all this is not so much the creation of the positions as it is how they were selected to do that. And I think, was there any kind of competitive announcement, any announcement at all? And was there any kind of competitive or even, what would I say, solid evidence that these two were the two that should be promoted to this position?
Oh, we've talked about this for about a year now. I had this ready to go at staff level and at meetings and stuff. We've heard concerns about it. But these positions aren't filled already.
Over again.
Pardon me?
Seems to me that every time there's a promotion or a promotion, we're seeing the same names over and over again. Seems as if, are these two all-stars? I mean, are these two guys just so great that there was no question they should be put in leadership positions?
We have no idea who these two people are. We haven't even interviewed for them or even posted the job
Names
description.
in the, never mind.
I have a couple quick questions. We know that the regular, if I'm understanding correctly, the regular crew is at a pay grade of 126. These lead positions are one step higher, 127. Do we know the differentiation in pay between those two grades? I don't have the compensation scale in front of me.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me either.
And then if you're also able to let us know, you said there's specialized equipment operators that also are a little bit higher pay. What scale are they?
The pay scale for a specialized equipment operator is at 126. We are looking at putting them at a 127, which is basically a 5% increase.
And the regular crew is at a?
We have equipment operator ones at 123 and equipment operator twos at 125.
So they jump up 2 scales from 1 to 2, and then 2 scales from 2 to leadership, lead role type.
Depending on who the individuals are, yes, somebody could, if we have somebody new that could fulfill this role and shows the ability to do it, they could go from a 123 to a 127, or we could have somebody from a 126, a specialized, go to a 127.
Okay,
yes.
So you could actually have a domino effect where a 126 goes to a 127. You got an opening in a 126, so somebody bumps up to there and it trickles through the department.
Correct. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And each pay scale is approximately a 5% increase?
I do believe so. That's how it works out. Yes.
Okay, so if they're jumping from a crew level 2 to this leadership role, it would be a 10% increase. Just
yes.
like it would be a 10% going
yes.
from a level 1 to a level 2 in the crew. Approximately.
Yeah.
That's all I had for questions. Any other questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, we have a motion to send this on to the council. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Looks like we have one dissension. That motion passes. All right, item number 10. Request to recommend council approval of budget resolution number 07-2022, increasing 2022 adopted budget for Tiff District number 12, East Yellowstone Industrial Park by an amended amount of $438,000, purchase of land for industrial development, presented by Dan Kneck, Director of Public Works.
Thank
Take it away,
you.
Dan.
Thank you. Some of you will recall that staff has been working to secure additional lands for our Yellowstone Industrial Park for the last year and a half or so. And we've been working with the University of Wisconsin to acquire approximately 124 acres of land that was part of the agricultural research station site on East 29th Street. Way back in 2002, the city obtained an option to purchase that land from the UW Board of Regents as part of a much bigger project to relocate the research station to its current site in Marathon County. That option to purchase had a 20-year life on it, expires in 2022. And back in February of 2021, the council authorized staff to execute that option to purchase. The Board of Regents was notified in July of 2021 that we were interested in exercising that option and purchasing the property. From there, each side obtained an independent appraisal for the land. The two appraisals were averaged, and the resulting value was established at just over $5,500 per acre. So the total purchase price for the 123 and some odd acres is $687,920. So that offer to purchase then was submitted to the Board of Regents in February of this year for that amount. The Board of Regents approved that at their meeting on April 7th. And now we're set to move toward a closing by the end of June of this year. With that final amount and the $250,000 prepayment, the balance due will be $437,920.64. That expense is a TIF eligible expense. This is part of TIF 12. So this budget resolution would establish that amount in the 2022 budget. And the borrowing for that amount would occur with this year's regular debt issue coming up in the next month or so. So tonight we'd recommend approval of budget resolution 07-2022 and refer it to the Common Council for consideration.
Mr. Wagner?
I'd move to approve.
And second by Mr. Hendler. Discussion, questions? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries
Thank you.
unanimously. Number 11, request to recommend council approval of a 2% wage scale adjustment for non-represented employees effective July 1, 2022, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you. The approved budget for 2022 includes a 1% wage scale adjustment for all non-represented staff effective July 1, 2022, so that's coming up soon. If you've noticed, and I'm sure you have, inflation is ramping up rather significantly. The most recent report that came from the federal government shows the consumer price index for the past 12 months, ending in April 22 at an 8.3%. With 1% scale adjustment and even including the step increases which council has approved, that still has employees falling well behind the rising cost of living. It also adds some concerns, just broadly speaking, for recruitment and retention, and contributes to the problem we have with police and fire compression. You'll be hearing about that soon when the pay compression team comes forward. For these reasons, I'm proposing a general pay scale increase be 2% effective July 1st rather than 1%. I did ask the finance department to take a look at this and cost it out. The estimated cost of the additional 1% pay scale adjustment for the second half of 2022 for non-represented staff only is $36,000. When you take out the portion that ties to our enterprise funds, wastewater, EMS, those kind of things, the amount is actually $30,000. That would be the general fund impact of the proposed increase for the back half of this year. It's difficult for us to calculate the exact dollar amount of the savings that we've been able to, reap, if you will, for lack of a better term, from the positions not being filled recently. We've had the finance director, accounting manager, they've been filled now, that's great. But we still have a human resources manager and a development services director position that have been vacant for 2 to 3 months. And so there have been savings there. Like I said, I don't have the exact dollar amount, but the vast majority, certainly, of the additional dollars for the pay that I'm requesting would be covered by the savings we've already realized, and that doesn't count what will be likely the case going forward before those 2 positions are filled. I do want you to keep in mind when you consider this that while we may have the money within the payroll budget for 2022 to cover this, that whatever wages are moved to, that will be the starting point for 2023. So I'm not trying to minimize the impact of the increase at all. But for the reasons referenced, recruitment, retention, and some compression in some cases, I would recommend that the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee recommend council approval of a 2% increase in the wage rate of all non-represented staff effective July 1, 2022.
What's your pleasure?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve
His second?
and a second by Tompkins. Any discussion? Yes.
I'm just wondering, just thinking about the 2023 budget, what percentage of our budget is wages? Do you have any rough ballpark estimate?
Yeah, we talked about that early. Do we have any kind of rough estimate? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't calculate that. Can certainly follow up with a memo.
It's fairly high, and that's because, we don't make a product, we provide a service. So the lion's share of our budget is the police officer who comes to your house, the building inspector who inspects your garage, whatever. It's much higher than the private sector. I would surmise it's probably more than 50%, although I'm not looking at it.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you. I was looking for the numbers last Friday when it came out. And I was trying to figure out where we stand regionally and where we stand within the city itself, in comparison with other industries and industry sectors within the city. Again, the only thing I could find was the information off of Data USA for 2019. I'd been working off of the 2018. They did please get up a year. And basically in the public service sector, the city of Marshfield as an employer is the second highest in average salary in the city. The first is, surprise, utilities. That's a huge amount. We treat our employees pretty well, or we try to anyway. The problem is we're not playing with our money, we're playing with taxpayers' money. And, to go and increase this without the benefit of studying it as part of a budget, as part of a whole budget, I feel very uncomfortable with. The second thing, and this is a personal feeling, and I try to keep my personal feelings out of this as much as I can, but this is getting a little rough for me. And the rough thing is, all of us sitting around the table, the podium here tonight, went through an election for alderpersons and a mayor during the past few months, and we all know that during that 4.5 month election campaign, political campaign, there was one candidate who was making a rather big deal about our high turnover rate and blaming it all on the city council. You might remember that. Mm-hmm. I certainly do. And basically, I feel like I've got a gun to my head right now. Because if we deny this, and the first person who leaves afterwards, it's going to be our fault. And I feel very put upon in that regard. And I don't appreciate it. It's here, we'll deal with it. I just feel it's uncalled for. I know I was on the bargaining team with the police union. We settled with the police union. They considered the union considered the inflationary pressures at that time too. And we settled for something. As a matter of fact, we settled with them for the same thing we gave the city hall employees this year. So now we're going to change it. Now what's the union going to say? Are they going to trust?
Can I respond to that?
That's where I come from, so I will yield the floor.
Yeah, I certainly respect your comments and certainly the part about being elected officials and the way your actions are scrutinized and you went through an election. But I really truly believe if in the fall of 2021, we'd have been having the conversation knowing that the inflation rate for the last 7 or 8 months was going to ramp up the way it was. First of all, I would have definitely requested 2%. You might have said no, but there's no way I would have requested a 1% adjustment of the wage scale if I'd have known that we were going to be sitting at 8.3% over the last 12 months right tonight. I just, you're concerned. We've talked about why people are leaving. There's a variety of reasons why people are leaving. Some leave it because they've gotten better job offers, something more fitting with where they want to go in their career. Any number of issues come into play. But compensation has been referenced, along the way by some of the staff who's left. And I really think if we're not making an effort to recognize the rising inflation rate in a meaningful way, you may feel like there's a gun to your head. I don't mean it that way. That's not my intention at all, believe me. But I think we do a disservice by not considering something of this nature.
Mrs. Tompkins?
I think, we do have to look at all sectors across society. I would say that Marshfield Clinic employees have not received a wage, like any hourly employee. It's just based on the year. Every year they get a little bit of an increase. So I think everyone is experiencing this. Small business owners, if they're paying their employees more to get more employees, then they're getting it hit somewhere else. Can we request as a committee to see how this would affect the next budget? Because if we have the money for it now, but then it affects our budget for next year, I think that's an important piece of information that we need to see.
Yeah, I think we can come up with what that might look like, broadly speaking, in terms of wages and benefits. What would be the starting point next year compared to what the starting point would have been if we just followed out the 2022 budget the way it was approved last fall, if that would be helpful.
There's a council member in the audience that would also like to speak. Mr. Fisher?
Thank you for recognizing me. I would just like to state, I agree with a statement that you made, Alderman Wagner, that we have, and I'm paraphrasing, but we have to be fiscally responsible with taxpayer dollars. This is the money of our constituencies. So I agree with you and I respect that position. But one thing I think we have to keep in mind is inflation is out of control. I mean, it is over 8%. Even in my business, in the finance industry, I mean, yes, raising interest rates 50 basis points, possibly 75 basis points, will hopefully tighten things. But even with that, we're still going to see increased inflation over the next year. I mean, really, if the Federal Reserve wanted to fix this, they would have to do even more increases in interest rates, which I don't see them doing at this point. So we're going to continue, in my opinion, to see increased inflation. It might slow down, but it's going to increase. And if it's already at 8% and we're only offering our employees 1%, I do struggle with that. So I do think we need, and I would like to encourage this committee, but I do think as a council, we need to look at the 2% to help our employees. So thank you.
Mr. Wagner?
I want to just bring up that, we're offering 1% on July 1st. They already had 2% on January 1st. That's what it was supposed to be. And then there are also stip increases there that range anywhere at the lower end from 2.5% to 1% at the top end. So we don't talk about the 1%. And how am I wrong that the 2% didn't happen at the first of the year?
No, that ties to July 1st too. It all happens on July 1st, both the step increases and the across the board increase. And you're not wrong. I mean, if there's a new employee who started at step one today and, I started at step one, let's say last year, they'd be looking at a 1% increase plus the 2.5% increase in a step going from step one to step two. So effectively their pay increase would be more. But I think you have to remember, we've had this conversation before. The step system was designed that you start at 90% of your market value. And the plan is as you proceed and grow, we want to move you up to that market rate and beyond if you deserve it. So those are part of the increase you get, but it's a different thing totally than adjusting the scale to represent the fact that whether it's market pressures or inflation or whatever, the cost of those employees, if you're making 60,000 to 80,000 is your range needs to be adjusted to 60 something to 80 something because those pressures are driving up the pay scale for your position. And the steps are just basically saying you're moving from being a newer employee to being a more proficient, growing, developing employee who deserves to be moved up in your range on its own.
It's my impression, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. It's my impression that when we set the budget, when we work on the budget, we basically decide upon a cost of living increase, and that goes into the median of the salary, and it spreads to each side of it. So if we said, if we gave a 2% cost of living, that it's already spread within the steps, is that correct?
Yeah, it's applied to the scale. The scale will be modified on July 1st based upon the broad wage increase you get. That is correct.
Does every cell go up equally,
Well,
percentage-wise?
we've had this question before. In fact, we've talked about it at staff level because, what we have said is that on those lower steps, the adjustment for the step is 2.5%. The middle steps is 2%. The higher level is 1.5%. And the way it's been allocated in the past doesn't quite exactly work out to that because, for the very reason that Ed is saying. We've started in the middle and then worked out. So where you might think somebody gets 2.5% in the early year, maybe they get 2.38% or something like that. It's not exact. But I did talk to the consultants since Jen left, and their impression was that we should always have been doing it so that those steps are exactly 2.5, 2.0, and 1.5, depending upon where you are on your scale. It's close anyway, but the thought was it should probably be exact, and we're looking at that issue right now as we look to adjust the scale on July 1st.
You're talking about the differentiation between steps on the scale. What I'm
Correct.
what I'm wondering is if a 2% increase is applied to the salary scale, does every step go up a 2% increase? Or is it adjusted based on a 2% increase of the median?
No, my understanding is that every step would go up 2%. I mean, if
then your differentiation between the median and the low end are going to gradually increase, because if you're increasing everybody by 2%, the median is going up 2%, that means 90% is no longer 90% because it didn't go up at this, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I know the intent is always to keep the range between 90% and 117.5. So, I mean, I have to look at the numbers exactly to see if that doesn't work out from what you're saying. That is the intent of the scale, is to keep it in that range so that you start at 90% and work your way up to being a market rate performer and then perhaps beyond.
Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, well, if this passes, which I assume that it's going to, are we going to have to are we going to have to do a budget resolution to include the new expenditures? The new one, the effect of the 1%?
Okay, go ahead.
That will depend on the actual savings that we had. It's something that I intend to monitor as we go forward.
Well, I don't know that maybe you can explain this to me a little better, because I keep hearing you talk about the savings. Under a normal circumstances, if, with not assuming the inflationary pressure that you're feeling or whatever, at the end of the year, if there is a budget surplus in that item, that gets transferred into the general fund as unrestricted on reserve, and then allocated from there. And what you're doing is you're saying, well, we're already allocating it against this raise. And I don't know if that's the right way to do it. A budget is a budget, and if not, well, it's not just a budget is a budget. A pay scale is a pay scale. How many times have we heard, do you guys really want to do another pay scale? You want to throw out the pay scale and spend another $50,000 on a new pay scale? We've got a pay scale, we try and follow it. We've got a budget, and we try and follow that. And I just feel extremely uncomfortable about the way money is being shifted around like it doesn't matter, because it does matter, because it's not our money. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if we, need to comment. I certainly don't want Jennifer trying to answer on the fly. But I mean, at its core, the savings in personnel costs from the people who have left and not been refilled for 3, 4, maybe almost 5 months offsets the increase. And that's a fact. However that plays out on paper, that's just a fact in terms of the total personnel expenses that we face for 2022.
Mrs. Spiros?
Okay, so, I'm understanding what you're saying. When you didn't fill Jen Rake's position for months and months and months, and you didn't fill Josh Miller's position for months and months and months, you obviously saved their salaries. And and probably, like you say, if it's only going to come to, what did you say earlier, 30,000 for this year was the rough estimate?
30,000 in general
If I
fund.
recall.
Right, 30,000 in general fund, more if you include wastewater, for example, but that's a separate fund entirely.
Okay, so I'm very confident that we have saved $30,000 not filling those positions, because I know what they made. I know what their base salaries are. So calculating months out that they haven't been filled, we have the money to do it. I think the concern is what it does to the wage, or what it does to the scale in general, and what happens next year to the budget, and if we're able to continue to afford it. However, I'm going to get back to the human side of things here, and with the inflation rate as it is, I mean, people are already making adjustments to their lifestyles. They're not going to be eating out. They're not going to be traveling as much. They're not going to be putting gas in their cars as often. You know, this all has an effect on the Marshfield economy if people can't spend money. And I think that we have to bear that in mind. And I think this is just the right thing to do. I do think it's very important that you come back with some numbers for what it looks like for next year, because that's a pretty important part of it. This year, we can handle that raise. That isn't a question. We saved wages, you know, by not hiring people. Okay, but what does next year look like when the whole entire wage scale gets adjusted up, all steps, it sounds like to me, by 2%?
Mrs. Tompkins.
I'm not quite sure with procedure, but is there a way to amend the motion
Do
to
you want to
say,
postpone the vote?
or postpone the vote? Can we do that until we have more information about next year's
I believe
budget?
you can. I believe we can postpone this. And
Can I?
so I'm assuming you want to move to postpone this vote till next meeting.
Well, I would like to make a motion to postpone the vote with the qualifier that we would see how this affects the budget for next year. Because we're not just making a decision for this year, this is a decision that will keep on going.
It has a ripple effect for the future. And I have a second by Mr. Endler. Postpone the vote until we have further information at the next meeting. All right, I just want to, I guess, make one quick comment. We talk about compression with the represented employees creeping up on the supervisory positions. I'm also concerned of the opposite happening on the other end. So we have a wage scale. We have all these steps, all of these different positions, you know, step 123 and 125 and 127 that we heard about earlier. And we have all these different steps. And so these are all of our non-represented employees that work for the city. And then somewhere in the middle, we have a bunch of represented people, a bunch of union employees, firefighters and police. And we're worried about this group in the middle approaching the top end leadership and the compression and the fact that that's getting tighter and tighter. My concern is the significant change or increase between the non-represented who are getting minimal raises and the represented who continue to get better raises. And if I'm correct, I believe the police contract had multiple percentage increases every 6 months for a period of their contract. So the concern I have is not only is the compression happening from those individuals to the leadership, but also then is there a increasing gap between the non-represented, say, office staff at the departments and those represented employees. And that would be an area, I hate to say it, but I think 2 is not enough, in my opinion. But again, we have to consider this is not our money. This is taxpayer money, and what impact does this have moving forward? So I do believe that we need more information before we move forward. Mr. Wagner, you were going to say something?
Yes, you're, if I remember correctly, and I think Steve can check me out on this, I think Jennifer was in there too, when the settlement with the police union was 3 years, 2% on January 1st and 1% on July 1st, each year for 3 years.
Yeah.
So it compounded out to about, I think 8.75% or something like that, 8.8%, something like that, over the period of 3 years. So that might help you a little bit with your math.
So they're getting a fairly significant amount of increase over those 3 years.
And it was based on the assumption by both parties that inflation was going to eat a certain amount of that.
Okay. All right, we have yes, Mr. Barton?
Oh, I'm just going to add one more thing. Just going back to it, I think I said before that, the employees who are leaving leave for different reasons. But I do think they pay attention to whether or not over time, the council in the city is keeping up on the pay plan. And admittedly, when I sat before you or stood before you back last fall and said 1% wage scale adjustment, and then the steps would be something, that would seem appropriate. I really think that if we went back to that time and looking now at what's happened, that it would be seen in a different light because of the rapidly growing inflation and how that really has eroded what that looked like once.
All right, we have a motion to postpone this till next meeting. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We'll discuss it again in 2 weeks with more information. All right, that was number 11, right?
Yes.
All right, number 12, request to recommend council approval of resolution number 2022-17, writing off uncollectible EMS accounts in the amount of $15,217.40, presented by Jennifer Solenski, Finance Director.
Thank you. The city outsources its whole ambulance billing system to LifeQuest Services, and they have a very rigorous program. Once they have billed a customer to collect on that invoice. However, there are such circumstances that do arise that make those amounts uncollectible, such as they didn't collect proper identifying information, or the patient has passed away. They do or they don't have medical insurance. And where appropriate, LifeQuest does turn these accounts over to any collection agency that is available to them, including the tax return intercept program. And sometimes that doesn't have a very big impact on the collection amount. After they've gone through their entire process in 2021, they wrote off the $15,000. And the Fire and Police Commission did approve this write-off at their meeting on May the 11th. And so I would ask that you approve resolution number 2022-17, the ambulance account write-offs, and refer the measure to Common Council for its approval as well.
Mr. Wagner?
Move to approve.
Move to approve from Mr. Wagner. Any second? Mrs. Tompkins seconds that. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. All right, that motion passes 4-1. All right. Item 13, request to recommend council approval to add the ability for employees to contribute monies from their Roth IRAs into their accounts through the city's deferred compensation or 457 plan, presented by Jennifer Solenski, Finance Director.
So the city of Marshfield does offer a comprehensive benefit package to its employees. It includes health, vision, dental insurance, long-term disability, flexible spending accounts, and a 457 deferred compensation plan, as well as the WRS retirement plan. Employees currently have the option to contribute their pre-tax dollars through payroll deductions to the 457 plan. And this additional Roth option is an added benefit that does not cost the city any additional money, as this would be a payroll deduction from the employee's gross pay on an after-tax basis. The advantage of this plan is that upon retirement and meeting all of the IRS regulations, the earnings can be withdrawn from the Roth account tax-free. Again, there is no cost to the city, incremental cost to the city for this plan. So with that, staff recommends the approval to pursue the Roth contribution option as an addition to its benefits portfolio, and refer to Common Council for its consideration.
It's your pleasure.
Move that we add this to the compensation packet and portfolio.
All right, so we have a recommendation, we have a motion to recommend to council for approval, second by Mr. Hendler. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, please, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Number 14, adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statute 19.85 sub 1 sub C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data on any public employee over which the governing governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically promotion and related compensation issue, policy number 3.800, and initial step increases for certain new or promoted employees, also policy number 3.800. Do I have a motion to go into closed session? Motion by Mr. Wagner, second by Mrs. Tompkins.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Witzel,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Tompkins. Hendler. Spiros.
Yes.
We are in closed session. We're back in open session. In closed session, we discussed the potential promotion of an individual to mechanic 2, and so we're looking for action. We're looking for a motion to approve the promotion to mechanic 2, placing that individual on step 9 of pay grade 127, and making that individual eligible for a pay increase and step increase on July 1 of 2022. Mr. Wagner has the motion. Mr. Hendler has the second. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Any suggested items for future agendas?
It's 3 weeks off. It's, I don't have anything in the hopper right now.
It's 3?
Yeah, it'll be 3, because we have 5 Tuesdays this month.
Oh,
So there'll be next, there's nothing really.
all right. Seeing nothing for future agendas and seeing no other business before this body, I declare this meeting adjourned.
Make it squeak.